afternoon. I'm Victoria Marshall with the latest news from the Washington Watch news desk. Yesterday was day 2 of the Democratic National Convention. There were some notable guests during last night's primetime speeches, including Senator Bernie Sanders, former First Lady Michelle Obama, and former President Barack Obama. First up, Bernie Sanders talked about how Americans are struggling under our current economy, which somehow translates into an endorsement for Kamala Harris.
Because too many of our fellow Americans are struggling every day to just get by, to put food on the table, to pay the rent, and to get the health care they need.
Is Sanders not aware that Kamala is in power now? Here's CNN senior commentator Scott Jennings' take.
She's in the White House right now. Democrats have controlled the White House for 12 of the last 16 years. And for all of the talk about division and the problems in the country and people are hurting, Democrats have mostly controlled this country. Trump had it for 4. The Obamas and Biden had it for the rest of the time. And somehow, it's still all Trump's fault, and somehow she hasn't been at the center of it. So
next, Democratic darling and former First Lady Michelle Obama gave a defense of an America without borders, saying no one has a monopoly on what it means to be an American.
All of our contributions deserve to be accepted and valued. Because no one has a monopoly on what it means to be an American. No one.
Finally, former President Barack Obama gave the keynote speech during last night's convention, where he spent half of it demonizing Donald Trump and the other half bemoaning political polarization.
The other side knows it's easier to play on people's fears and cynicism, always has been. They will tell you that government is inherently corrupt, that sacrifice and generosity are for suckers. And since the game is rigged, it's okay to take what you want and just look after your own. That's the easy path. We have a different task. Our job is to convince people that democracy can actually deliver.
Of course, when democracy doesn't deliver the results Obama wants, he has no issue with orchestrating a coup against the sitting president and installing a candidate that hasn't received a single vote in any national election. Go figure. And in other domestic news, the U.S. economy added far fewer jobs in 2023 and 2024 than what was previously reported. On Wednesday, the Labor Department said that its monthly payroll figures overstated job growth by 818,000 in the 12 months that ended in March, meaning employers added just 174,000 jobs per month during that period, down from the previously reported 242,000 jobs per month, a downward revision of 28%. The updated numbers are the latest sign that cracks in the labor market are more severe and began forming earlier than initially believed. And in other bad news for the Biden administration, the Department of Homeland Security's Office of Inspector General just came out with a new report that says over 290,000 children that have come across the southern border illegally under the Biden administration are unaccounted for. In the August 19th report, it notes that the admin lost track of more than 32,000 unaccompanied children between fiscal years 2019 and 2023, the majority on President Joe Biden and Vice President Harris's watch. In addition, the report notes that ICE has failed to serve notices to appear in court to nearly 300,000 children, who therefore may be lost to government tracking. Further, ICE has no assurance they are safe from trafficking, exploitation, or forced labor. And those are today's headlines. I'm Victoria Marshall. For more news and commentary, check out the Washington Stand at WashingtonStand.com. Up next is Washington Watch with Tony Perkins. We'll see you tomorrow with more news and commentary.
From from the heart of our nation's capital in Washington, D.C., bringing compelling interviews, insightful analysis, taking you beyond the headlines and sound bites into conversations with our nation's leaders and newsmakers, all from a biblical worldview. Sitting in for Tony is today's host, Jody Heiss.
Well, good afternoon. Welcome to this Wednesday edition of Washington Watch. I'm your host, Jody Heiss, Senior Vice President here at the Family Research Council and President of FRC Action. We, as always, have a lot coming your way today. It was day 2 of the Democratic National Convention. It took place last night, and now it's all in the books. Among the speakers were former President and Mrs. Obama. They addressed the partisan crowd on behalf of the Harris-Walz campaign. Also among those who took the stage was independent Senator Bernie Sanders, who also expressed his support for the Harris-Walz agenda.
I look forward to working with Kamala and Tim to pass this agenda. And let us be very clear. This is not a radical agenda.
Not a radical agenda. Wow. Well, frankly, it is a radical agenda. Unfortunately, there are many, as actually revealed by a recent survey, but there are many who, within the Democrat Party and independent voters, they are largely unaware of the radical and controversial policies and positions of Vice President Harris and Walz and what they have endorsed. I will be talking with Curtis Houck, who's the managing editor of Newsbusters at the Media Research Center, here in just a few moments about that very important survey that they took. It'll be startling for you to hear it. And earlier today, the Bureau of Labor Statistics revised the growth numbers for the first quarter of 2024. And surprise, surprise, they've now revealed that their previous numbers included almost 1 million jobs that did not even exist. Yep, more Bidenomics at work. I'll get a reaction to all of that from Kansas Congressman Ron Estes, who is a member of the Budget Committee, just a little bit later here in the program. And last week, the Texas Children's Hospital fired Vanessa Savage. She's a nurse there, and in fact, she's also a former intern here at FRC. But she revealed that the hospital doctors continued pushing sterilization and mutilization for children after the hospital claimed that they had stopped such practices. Well, we'll be hearing from Marcella Burke. She's the attorney for Vanessa and also the attorney for Dr. Atwan Heim, who is a surgeon there at Texas Children's Hospital. He was indicted by the Biden Department of Justice after he revealed the practices at the hospital as well. The FRC, by the way, has an organized petition right now to have Vanessa reinstated, and you can sign that by texting the word nurse to 67742. So help us out with that and help Vanessa with that as well. And then we have a grassroots effort that is launched in Idaho to protect election integrity there in the Gem State. We'll hear about that from Michael Angeletta, who is a co-founder of Secure Idaho Elections, as we continue this week's election integrity segment. So, yep, we've got a lot coming your way today on Washington Watch. You don't want to miss any of it, but if by chance you miss a portion of it, you can always catch it by going to our website, TonyPerkins.com. All right, this election year is critical. I don't have to tell you that. You, of all people, are well informed of just how critical this upcoming election is. And I want to invite you to join us in Washington, D.C. from October the 3rd through the 6th for our annual Pray, Vote, Stand Summit. It's a powerful gathering, a national gathering of spiritually active, governance-engaged conservatives, SageCons, as many of us know that group as, and all that are going to be attending, for the most part, recognize that we need spiritual renewal in this country. Registration is open right now, and I ask you to join us as we pray for our nation, as we engage in government and culture, as we stand for biblical truth. You can find out more by going to this special website, PrayVoteStand.org. PrayVoteStand.org. And there you can get more details and also register for that powerful conference. All right, let's jump into the details for today. Day 2 of the Democratic National Convention is now officially in the books. In a ceremonial vote, Democratic Party leaders moved forward with Vice President Kamala Harris as their presidential nominee. But do rank-and-file Democrats and independents recognize just how radical, just how controversial the various positions that Harris has taken over the years? Well, joining me now with his reaction is Curtis Houck. He's a managing editor of Newsbusters at the Media Research Center. Curtis, welcome back to Washington Watch. It's good to have you.
Good to have you, sir.
All right. Well, we got day 2 of the DNC behind us. Tell us your thoughts so far.
Well, the media have behaved just like we would expect. You know, anytime the Obamas show up, the media remind us of the fact that for them, this is their base convention. And few things get them more excited than the Obamas. Their faux sort of almost religious-like following, their straw men, as the great George Will once said, Obama's a pyrotechnic amidst straw men when it comes to talking about civility and our politics. So the networks have behaved as such, talking about how electrifying everything was, and falsely claiming that Barack Obama in 2008 electrified the nation with his hope and change agenda. Well, as we know, conservatives here, you all at FRC, we know that that was not the case at all. Revisionist history of the highest degree. So it's the kind of propaganda you would expect. Yes, this is a base convention to get them excited, but at the same time, you know, the media are definitely offering screamers that we definitely didn't see and never see during a Republican convention.
Well, well said. You know, we're going to get to this probably a little bit more later, but day 1, there was a comment made. I was hoping to be able to get to this yesterday, but wasn't able to. But Michigan State Senator Mallory McMorrow, you probably saw this. I want to play this and get your reaction. If we would put up clip 4, please.
Donald Trump would be able to weaponize the Department of Justice to go after his political opponents. He could even turn the FBI into his own personal police force. That is not how it works in America. That's how it works in dictatorships. And that's exactly what Donald Trump and his MAGA minions have in mind.
Wow. All right, I could almost tell by your reaction before we ever even got to that clip. But did anybody do any fact-checking on this?
Well, actually, there have been attempts, or at least what they would claim to be attempts. Daniel Dale's come out and said it's largely very, very factual. Wait, what? You know, excuse me. This is the difference here, Congressman, between the way they look at the left versus conservatives. With conservatives and President Trump, they fact-check, statements. They may fact-check partisan statements about Kamala Harris being liberal. They fact-check statements about how the economy would be worse off under Kamala Harris because they say there's no evidence that that would be the case. You're like, wait, what? Whereas they can make statements about how a second Trump administration would be some sort of totalitarian police state, Handmaid's Tale. There are all sorts of apocalyptic rhetoric out there, but at the end of the day, the media will say that it's hope and change. Whereas when we talk about this as conservatives, we get branded as doomsday preppers, more or less.
Yeah, it's insane. The double standard is unbelievable. And there's a lot more. I'd love to get in with some other things, but I do want to transition. But, to go along with what you're saying, even Bernie Sanders last night, he's talking about how horrible the economic headwinds are, people struggling. Has he not noticed who's in the White House? I mean, it's just incredible. These people act as though they don't even have an incumbent in the White House and that Kamala Harris has nothing to do with all the problems we're facing. But speaking of people being unaware, I brought this up coming in, and a new media research poll has found that there's a large majority of registered Democrats and independents who are absolutely in the dark when it comes to some of the controversial and radical positions that Harris has taken. Fill us in on what you guys did, what you found out.
Yeah, folks may remember our post-2020 poll where we looked at Biden voters and we asked them in the swing states, would your vote have changed if you knew about various Trump successes or Biden scandals? So we're back at it again. We looked at 10 different policy positions that Kamala Harris has held during her career. We surveyed Biden voters, so Democrats, independent voters, people who are going to probably vote for Kamala Harris. And we just said, are you aware or unaware? Those were the only two options. And some things were stunning. Of the 10 things that we polled, they were no lower than 71% unaware. 71% of her voters are unaware that she has flirted with defunding the police and thought we should talk about reparations. 73% did not know that she's in favor of the Green New Deal, something that I think is a positive for conservatives that we kind of talk about more with her being at the top of the ticket than Joe Biden, because I don't really think there was an understanding about him being passionate about those kinds of things. 78% of her voters did not know that in 2020, she encouraged supporters to donate to the Minneapolis Bail Fund to release violent criminals who rioted and destroyed those city streets after what happened with George Floyd. It goes all the way up to 86% of her voters did not know that at a CNN town hall, which nobody watches CNN, so could maybe give them some grace on this one, did not know that we should have a conversation about death row inmates being allowed to vote. So no matter how you slice it, no matter what issue, whether it's the economy, the environment, crime, the border, her voters do not know what she believes in. And the fact that they're still willing to vote for her anyway is a really dangerous commentary on the state of our politics.
Well, two things come out to me, two questions. I don't know that we're going to have time to get into all of this. But number one, it shows how successful the media has really been in hiding her position so that voters don't know what she believes, even voters within her party. But the second thing, in about a minute that we have left, the Trump campaign, the Republican Party as a whole, cannot be asleep at the wheel when it comes to these issues you've just talked about.
Right, exactly. I mean, I think the narrative that they want to be out there is that Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, and the Tim Walz pick underlining this, is that they are a danger to the country's, each individual American's personal, economic, and national security. And we have another study at Newsbusters that I'm just going to flag for people to check out, our positive negative coverage, something else we're known for as well. The media have given Kamala Harris 84% positive coverage on ABC, CBS, and NBC. And on the evening shows, only twice mentioned her party ideology, mentioned her as a progressive, tried to assign a label to us, because we know on our side, we're always labeled conservative, hard right, or even just Republican. There's always some sort of label affixed to us, but they haven't even done that for Kamala Harris. So if they're not willing to talk about the party label, they're not going to talk about her policies. It's all about the history in this and the excitement that she's younger than Joe Biden.
Wow. Curtis Halleck, managing editor there at Newsbusters, thank you so much for joining us. We deeply appreciate it. Great insight you brought to the table. All right, after the break, I'm going to be joined by Congressman Ron Estes as we talk about the so-called revised job growth numbers. Wow, stay tuned. Much more Washington Watch coming your way. Stay tuned.
Download the new Stand Firm app for Apple and Android phones today and join a wonderful community of fellow believers. We've created a special place for you to access news from a biblical perspective, read and listen to daily devotionals, pray for current events, and more. Share the Stand Firm app with your friends, family, and church members, and stand firm everywhere you go.
Hello, I'm Jody Heiss, president of FRC Action. Here in America, we thank God for the right to vote, and we can all agree on the importance of this upcoming election. Many of us want to support candidates who share our values, but we're not comfortable supporting the big national political organizations. Well, we have a solution for supporting candidates through FRC Action's Faith, Family, and Freedom Fund. Being a super PAC, it allows for unlimited individual and corporate donations, so we can endorse and fund campaigns for people who share our values. By giving to this fund, we're able to pull all of our contributions together and support and endorse like-minded candidates. That's how we move the needle. So let's be the best stewards possible and get the most out of our political contributions by uniting our efforts. For more information or to contribute, visit faithfamilyfreedomfund.org. Thank you so much, and God bless you.
All of us are born with the desire to find truth and meaning. Where did I come from? What happens when I die? While our answers to these questions may divide us, we are united in our need for the freedom to answer life's biggest questions and make life's biggest decisions for ourselves. That's why religious freedom matters for everyone. Religious freedom matters because the powerful have long wanted to control those who are less powerful. Religious freedom matters because the freedom of those who are different is often threatened by those who believe different is dangerous. At the Center for Religious Liberty at Family Research Council, we promote religious freedom for everyone because the only alternative is religious freedom for no one. We encourage Americans and the American government to engage and advocate for the persecuted, and they do. We work every day to bring good news to the afflicted, to proclaim liberty to captives and freedom to prisoners. We do it because that's what Jesus does. We work to give freedom to others because we ourselves have been set free.
Good afternoon. Welcome back to Washington Watch. I'm your host, Jody Heiss. Glad to have you joining us today. All right, this week, the Bureau of Labor Statistics announced the U.S. economy added 818,000 fewer jobs from March 2023 to 24 than what they had previously reported. Quite a revision, almost 1 million jobs. This is by far the largest revision in 15 years, and it, of course, comes as Democrat presidential nominee Kamala Harris works to distance herself from Bidenomics and frankly, the Biden-Harris administrative failures that she herself has been involved with. They did not address the economic issues facing our country, including inflation and a host of other things. Well, joining me now to discuss this is Congressman Ron Estes. He serves on multiple committees in Congress, the Budget Committee, the Ways and Means Committee. He's one of these that's heavily involved in multiple areas, but particularly anything that has to do with economic issues. He represents the 4th Congressional District of Kansas. Congressman Estes, always great to have you back on the program. Good to see you, my friend.
Well, it's good seeing you too, Jody. Thanks for having me on again.
Always good to have you. All right, what do you make of these revised numbers? The job growth was not nearly what they said it was. What do you make of all this?
Yeah, it really is. The truth's actually coming out. The Biden-Harris administration has been talking about supposedly all these jobs that he created. And in reality, what's happened is 2/3 of the jobs that have happened over the last 3.5 years were jobs that came back after the COVID shutdown. So they really weren't creating jobs. Labor force participation is nowhere near as high as what it was under President Trump. And now we're seeing that the actual facts are coming out that over the last year, they've overstated by 68,000 jobs a month, or over 800,000 jobs, the number of people that were actually working. And it's reflective of what we're seeing, the folks that I talk to here, and both in Kansas as well as around the country, is the economy is not in good shape, that we're starting to struggle a little bit. People are having a hard time suffering under the inflation consequences that came out of all of the spending that came through from these ideas that Biden and Harris administration have promoted, whether it's more regulations, whether it's some of the big giveaway programs that they've promoted, and just in general, a higher level of spending. And it's tough now for Americans out across the country.
Yeah, even Bernie Sanders admitted that last night, which was quite shocking. He admitted how many families are struggling. And so we come to talk about all the working families. We got jobs reports is nowhere near accurate, trying to make people think that things are a whole lot better than they really are. And so what do we do with this? It seems like this administration over and over tries to present some sort of rosy jobs report that is not accurate, as you just referenced, even on a monthly basis. Is all of this just an outright deliberate lie, trying to throw one over on the American people?
Yeah, it almost seems that way. I mean, when you look at over and over again repeated instances of where the facts come out that are completely different than what's been presented from either statements that President Biden said or Vice President Harris has said, or their folks that work for them. And it's really unfortunate. You can run down the litany of different cabinet agencies, even including the Department of Justice, where instances where they've said one thing and when in reality the facts came out that something else was true. And that's really a sad reflection on our government. We want to make sure that whether there's a Democrat that's elected as the president or a Republican that's elected as the president, the government ought to be working for all the people and not making stuff up along the way so that we have to come back in a situation like this and the truth comes out. And more often than not, they try to hide it along the way. We need to make sure that the government's providing truthful information so that people can make decisions on whether they're voting decisions or whether they're decisions about investments or how do you support your family, what kind of work you can do, what kind of monetary spending you can make because of what you know you have available.
Yeah, I mean, and there's also a trust factor in all of this. I mean, do you think that, future jobs report, how much trustworthiness will there be with future jobs reports? Should people trust what they hear?
Yeah, it really is a reflection, and we're suffering consequences. Back in 2021, when President Biden came into office, he and Vice President Harris were talking about that there wasn't going to be inflation with all of their spending programs. The Federal Reserve stepped in and agreed with them, and we're talking about it was only going to be transitory inflation. And then lo and behold, the Federal Reserve had to raise all these interest rates. And so now we've seen suffering for the last 3 years on higher interest rates. Federal Reserve now looks like it is going to have to start or will start lowering those interest rates probably in September. But it does create concerns for anybody that's making decisions around whether you start a new plant or whether you look for a new job for yourself, or decisions that you make about whether you want to buy a new home for your family or a car, because you don't know what the truthful story is about the economy. And so we need to make sure that our government particularly works for all the people and is truthful in the decisions and the announcements and information that it gives out.
Absolutely. Do you think as the truth continues to come out on this that it will have an impact on voters' opinions?
I think it really will, as we're starting to see. I mean, people have been suffering for almost a year now, and when you look at how much credit card debt has gone up, how much that people are having to spend for anything from food to gasoline, groceries, buying school supplies for your kids to go back to school. And now as we roll over the next 76 days towards the election, I think people are going to realize that, the last 3.5 years of the Biden-Harris administration was not good from an economic standpoint. And you compare that to the 4 years when President Trump was in office, and we did have a growing economy. We had job increases, we had wage increases, and it was positive things. And I think it's going to have an impact when people realize that the policies President Trump is promoting were better than the policies that President Biden and Vice President Harris put in place.
Congressman Ron Estes from Kansas, thank you so much for breaking this down for us. We appreciate it a great deal.
Well, great.
All right,
Thank
friends,
you, Jody.
after the break, we're going to take a look at election integrity efforts in the state of Idaho. So stay tuned. Much more coming your way right after the break.
Everything we do begins as an idea. Before there can be acts of courage, there must be the belief that some things are worth sacrificing for. Before there can be marriage, there is the idea that man should not be alone. Before there was freedom, there was the idea that individuals are created equal. It's true that all ideas have consequences, but we're less aware that all consequences are the fruit of ideas. Before there was murder, there was hate. Before there was a Holocaust, there was the belief by some people that other people are undesirable. Our beliefs determine our behavior, and our beliefs about life's biggest questions determine our worldview. Where did I come from? Who decides what is right and wrong? What happens when I die? Our answers to these questions explain why people see the world so differently. Debates about abortion are really disagreements about where life gets its value. Debates over sexuality and gender and marriage are really disagreements about whether the rules are made by us or for us. What we think of as political debates are often much more than that. They're disagreements about the purpose of our lives and the source of truth. As Christians, our goal must be to think biblically about everything. Our goal is to help you see beyond red and blue, left and right, to see the battle of ideas at the root of it all. Our goal is to equip Christians with a biblical worldview and help them advance and defend the faith in their families, communities, and the public square. Cultural renewal doesn't begin with campaigns and elections. It begins with individuals turning from lies to truth. But that won't happen if people can't recognize a lie and don't believe truth exists. We want to help you see the spiritual war behind the political war, the truth claims behind the press release, and the forest from the trees.
Thank you so much for joining us today on Washington Watch. I'm your host, Jody Heiss. Glad to have you with us. All right, as November approaches, we continue to focus on election integrity here on Washington Watch. And this week in Idaho, a group dedicated to free and fair elections launched Secure Idaho Elections. This is a grassroots nonprofit organization that's dedicated to protecting Idaho's one person, one vote elections. And this comes as Idaho voters will be confronted this year with Proposition 1, which is a ballot initiative for ranked choice voting in their state. We want to talk about that and more. So joining me now to discuss this is Michael Angeletta, co-founder of Secure Idaho Elections. Michael, welcome back to the program. Good to have you.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Okay, so first of all, thank you. Thank you very much for your role in co-founding this group. Let's begin with this Proposition 1. There may be some of our viewers, listeners, who may not be all that familiar with ranked choice voting. Tell us a little bit about Proposition 1 and ranked choice voting.
Yeah, so this proposition is something that if it hasn't already arrived at other states, it soon will. So even if you're not in Idaho, it's something you should probably be mindful of. But it essentially, Proposition 1 proposes to make two changes. The first is it seeks to create jungle primaries, i.e. blow open the Republican primary so Democrats can vote for Republicans or vice versa. And then the secondary change is moving the general elections to ranked choice voting, which is a bizarre, complex, and expensive scheme to essentially denigrate one person, one vote. Because what happens is a lot of people end up losing their votes, and their votes are silenced when we're talking about ranked choice voting. So those are the two changes they're proposing to make here in Idaho.
Yeah, and I don't know of any state that has had a good experience with ranked choice voting. If you're talking fair elections and honest elections with integrity. Can you run down that a little bit with us? What have other states experienced with ranked choice voting?
Yeah. So the most prime example, and right now, Alaska is looking to repeal it. So the repeal ranked choice voting just made it onto the ballot in Alaska. So kudos to Alaska for that. And that's because Alaskans had firsthand experience now with what ranked choicing really entails. And, you know, when Alaska implemented ranked choice voting for the first time ever, that House seat, which had always been Republican in a Republican state, flipped to the Democrat. Even though in the first round of tabulation of votes, the Republicans took 60% of the vote. So do the math on that one. And it created a 15-day delay on certifying the results. It increased the cost of implementing the election by over 300%. And 15% of the ballots were discarded. And that was approximately 15 to 20,000 ballots. And the reason why they were discarded, I'll tell you why. Because ranked choice voting requires you to vote and rank every candidate, including those you find repugnant, who do not align with your values. I like to call that an ultimatum. So 10,000 or more people decided, I'm voting for one candidate, the one I like. Well, guess what? If that candidate didn't get the top number of votes in that first round of elimination, their ballot was completely discarded for all other subsequent rounds. And so that's why Alaska is a prime example of how it goes wrong and why they're most likely going to repeal it.
Yeah, and the late Don Young from Alaska was a good friend. I would imagine he's still rolling over in his grave because of the ranked choice voting and what it did there in Alaska. All right, let's come back to secure Idaho elections. How is this organization going to be able to educate the public?
That's right. So we are completely grassroots, which means we're going to be outspent, even though we're in a red Republican state, by about 20-1. And that's because the money coming in to fund Proposition 1 coming from within Idaho. It's coming from Washington, D.C. dark money groups. There's groups like Fair Vote, Arabella Advisors, 1630 Fund, Unite America, the list goes on. And all of those groups ultimately fund ranked choice voting across the nation. So that's what we're up against. And so I'm just a regular entrepreneur at heart. All of my other co-founders, we have regular private sector jobs or are retired, but we feel so strongly that this is going to denigrate our election, which is simple and high trust, and it works. So why would we want to change that? So our goal, while we're bootstrapped, is to create assets that the ground folks, all the activists and all the different counties can use. So we're training speakers across every county. We're creating presentations for state fair trade shows. We're creating flyer assets, yard signs, and we're basically created a clearinghouse of educational content and marketing content that the folks in the field, because they're all grassroots, are going to be able to empower themselves with. So this is kind of a big experiment for the grassroots, but I'm very optimistic it's going to work.
Well, you know, it ultimately all comes down to bringing back, restoring, if you will, confidence in the voting system. People have to be confident that one vote cast, one vote counted. That's simple, basically what you're doing. Real quickly, are you seeing momentum? Are people supportive of what you're doing?
As we're getting close to the election, yes. Our biggest challenge right now is awareness. Most regular voters, they're not yet paying attention to what's on the ballot in November. So our job is to get to them ahead of time before the big money rolls in from Washington, D.C., to educate them on why ranked choice voting puts Idaho elections at risk. It's that simple. What we have now is high trust, and it works, and they all know it, and they don't want to mess with it.
Don't mess with it. Michael Angeletta, thank you so much for joining us, and thanks again for your great work in this organization. Godspeed to all of you in your work. All right, friends, after the break, we've got a whistleblower that's come out against the Texas Children's Hospital. What a mess has blown up there. We'll be speaking with the attorney in that case right after the break. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Join us October 3rd through the 6th as we gather with spiritually active, governance-engaged conservatives from across America at the Pray, Vote, Stand Summit in Washington, D.C. We'll pray for our nation, engage in government and culture, and stand for biblical truth alongside Christian leaders, worldview experts, and government officials. We'll discuss important issues like the sanctity of life, religious freedom, protecting students, strengthening families, praying for our nation, and how you can impact America's future from a biblical worldview. Our nation stands at a critical juncture, and we must ensure that the issues impacting faith, family, and freedom are understood and advanced. Register now at PrayVoteStand.org. That's PrayVoteStand.org.
Jesus said in John 15, "These things I have spoken to you, that my joy may remain in you, and that your joy may be full." In 2024, in these divided and uncertain times, how can this be possible? By abiding in Him through His Word. At Family Research Council, we want to help you do that, which is the reason for the Stand on the Word Bible reading plan. In just 10 to 15 minutes each day, you will have read the entire Bible in just 2 years. But more importantly, you will be abiding in Him daily. Find our Bible reading plan at frc.org/Bible. And join Tony Perkins each weekday for a 10-minute devotional inspired by the daily reading and designed to encourage you on this journey through the Bible. Listen on Apple Podcast, Spotify, and YouTube. And remember, the grass withers and the flower fades, but the word of our God will stand forever.
Research has found that there are 59 million American adults who are a lot like you. There are millions of people around the country who are born again, deeply committed to practicing their faith, and believe the Bible is the reliable Word of God. But that's not all. They're also engaged in our government. They're voters. They're more likely to be involved in their community, and they're making a difference in elections. The problem is that a lot of them feel alone too. We want to change that. FRC wants to connect these 59 million Americans to speak the truth together, no matter the cost. If you want to learn more about this group and what it means to be a spiritually active, governance-engaged conservative, or if you want to find out if you are one of these sage cons yourself, join us. Go to frc.org/SAGECON, SageCon, to learn more. That's SAGECON, SageCon, to learn more.
Good afternoon. Welcome back to Washington Watch. So honored to have you. I'm Jody Heiss, your host, and we're gonna let me kind of unfold where we're going here in just a moment. Before I do that, let me just once again remind you our Pray Vote Stand Summit is coming up in Washington D.C. October 3rd through the 6th. You do not want to miss this, friends. I'm just telling you, you will leave this conference feeling like this is one of the most powerful and meaningful summits that you've ever attended. You can register now. You get more information now. Go to PrayVoteStand.org, PrayVoteStand.org for more information or to register. All right. Now, let me, going into this last segment, we are, the guest is coming on, the attorney is running just a few minutes late, so I want to set up the story, and I want to speak with another guest about a part of this story. But the bottom line, the Biden administration has, as we all know, weaponized the Department of Justice. They're at it again. Just yesterday, federal jury convicted a group of Christian pro-life activists, including an 89-year-old woman. They have been found guilty of FACE Act violations and conspiracy of rights. So look, these people are now facing more than 10 years in prison and hundreds of thousands of dollars in fines upon their sentencing. That's the story I want to start with here in just a moment before we get to our other guests. The other part of this equation, which we're going to get to here in just a moment, earlier this summer, the DOJ indicted Dr. Eitan Haim. He's a surgeon at Texas Children's Hospital. He revealed that the hospital was secretly continuing to perform transgender medical interventions after it had publicly said that it would not do that any longer. And the FBI, they attempted to intimidate Vanessa Sivage, who is a nurse there at that same hospital and happens to be a former intern here at FRC, but she was the whistleblower that came out against the Texas Children's Hospital. And last week she was fired by the hospital because she came out. We're going to be joined by that attorney here in just a moment, Marcella Burke. Before we get there, though, I want to bring on Meg Kilgannon. Meg is, as you well know, the Senior Fellow for Education Studies here at FRC. Meg, let's talk about these Christians who have been arrested, found guilty, including an 89-year-old woman for peacefully, as I understand it, peacefully protesting in front of an abortion clinic. What can you tell us about this?
This case, Jody, is one of many from this Department of Justice, as you said, that continues to prosecute people for expressing their First Amendment rights to free speech, for objecting to abortions, objecting to the taking of innocent life, unborn life. And so these folks in Michigan, where this particular case is taking place, are facing serious jail time and hundreds of thousands of dollars in fines, as you said, as a result simply of protesting and seeking to protect the rights of the unborn to be born.
So two things. What is the FACE Act? What have they been doing, and what, as far as what did they violate? What law did they violate, and what were they actually doing in front of this clinic?
The FACE Act is about being able to access the abortion facility to have an abortion. So the pro-abortion folks do not like the fact that there are pro-life people outside the clinics praying. Sometimes the sidewalk counselors will seek to help minister to these women, to help them, to give them free pregnancy tests, to give them free ultrasounds, to provide health care for them at no cost, so that they have an alternative to abortion. Because there are many women who are interested in an alternative to an abortion, but they will not get information about that from an abortion clinic when they go into it. So there are many wonderful people doing sidewalk counseling and trying to save lives and help women in that regard. And so you hear people like Senator Elizabeth Warren and Vice President Harris who have extreme contempt for this kind of activity, because they want women to be able to go into the abortion facility unquestioned, unmolested, so that they can, have the procedure done. So these folks were doing that kind of work, and that is simply not going to be allowed in the Biden administration. They will prosecute people for doing this kind of thing.
And by the way, I may add that the FACE Act is also intended to protect pregnancy resource centers, and but this
it's never enforced that way, right?
That's what I was just going to say. Yeah, go ahead.
No, we hear all kinds of stories about pregnancy resource centers that are defaced, threatened, attacked in some ways, and for some reason the people who perpetrate those crimes are not brought to justice, and certainly not under the FACE Act by the federal government. But this Department of Justice has plenty of time to go after 89-year-old, communist concentration camp survivors who are pro-life, while they will not protect other people.
It's just stunning how the FACE Act is intended for both, but those who destroy, deface, threaten, whatever pregnancy resource centers, we can't find them. And there's been hundreds of those, by the way.
Yes.
But people who are praying outside of an abortion clinic, somehow that is a violation. And that the sentencing here is unbelievable. Meg Kilgannon, I want to thank you so much for joining us today and bringing this situation to light for us. All right, I want to go back now to the other half of this whole story, what's happening at the Children's Hospital in Texas. I shared with you about the doctor and also Vanessa Sivage, the nurse there. Well, the attorney representing both of them is Marcella Burke. She's a managing partner of the Burke Law Group, and that law firm is based in Houston. And they've taken on a number of cases like this across the country. Marcella, welcome to Washington Watch. We're honored to have you on the program.
Thanks for having me.
Well, no doubt there are probably a lot of different aspects to this story. But let's start with the latest on Vanessa, since the Texas Children's Hospital actually fired her last week.
Yes. So Vanessa Sivage is very brave. She's a nurse at Texas Children's Hospital. She had been reading in the news about another whistleblower at the hospital, and she knew that she had information that what he was saying was true about procedures happening in the building and, in fact, in the clinic in which she worked. And so she came forward to endorse what he had been saying, and in the meantime had asked the hospital for a religious accommodation. She is a Christian, and she could not in good conscience bear false witness against the teaching in the Bible about the binary sexes, that God created male and female. And so she just wanted an accommodation to be able to leave the transgender medical division of the hospital, or any division of the hospital that did that type of work, and to just go back to her original passion, which was working with children in the cardiac unit. So she asked for a religious accommodation. She was very specific about that being why she wanted to leave. And they did not give that accommodation. Instead, they terminated her. And so now she is in the position of not being employed. And she's just very brave. I mean, she knew this was a possibility always. I think she really believed, she's very hopeful, but always had hope that the hospital would do the right thing and would accommodate her, and they chose not to do that.
Well, and by the way, we do have a place where people can go to try to encourage the hospital to reinstate her, and you can simply text the word nurse to 67742 if you'd like to participate in that. All right, Marcella, Vanessa actually posted on X that she's got no regrets. What can you tell us, if anything, about what it's been like for you working with her, and how she's been doing in terms of just processing all of this?
She's an inspiration. Vanessa's very brave, very confident in her resolve and her just moral fortitude. She and her husband, I spoke to them over dinner when she was deciding whether or not she wanted to come forward and what could be the possible implications. And back then, they talked about a Bible verse in Ephesians about being bearers of light as Christians and to shine in the darkness. And they knew in their heart that she couldn't just, quietly walk away from this, that she knew she'd have to go public to have any sort of things change in the hospital. And so she's just known from the start that this would be difficult and that this would not be something that would come easily. And so she's just very brave, and she knows it's a process, and she's working the process, and she's very disciplined, and she trusts God. And so her faith is very inspiring to me, and the faith of her husband, it's all very inspiring. It's not every day as a lawyer you get to represent people in cases like this. And so I think this case is a real inspiration for everyone at our law firm. It's a real honor to represent women like Vanessa.
That's awesome. Well, the Justice Department is also pursuing Dr. Heim. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so the Justice Department has indicted Dr. Heim on 4 felony counts. It's very serious. He could go to jail for 10 years, and there's an enhancement that could put him in jail for up to 18 years. His trial is set for October. And that case, we've been very clear from the very beginning as his attorneys that we have thought that it was very misguided, that the government has the facts wrong, has the law wrong, and that it is astonishing, frankly, that the case has been brought, and that, we'll have to just go to trial, and we'll have to defend him on the merits of that for sure. Vanessa also was visited by the FBI. That was very intimidating for her. These are all things that, statements Vanessa's made publicly, that she and her husband had thought at first that by telling their story, that was sort of all they needed to do, and that they were going to let the process play out. She came out anonymously, and that was going to be their role in coming forward. And it really wasn't until the FBI came to their home and left, and that they realized, you know what, we're going to need to come public and put our names forward, because they're not going to take us seriously. And what's happening in this country with whistleblowers in different areas, but especially in this area where the government is now coming to our homes to intimidate us, and they're coming after us, and they're not coming after the doctors and the hospitals doing these things illegally. It's so concerning and so scary. So Eitan, Vanessa, we have other whistleblowers across the country at different hospitals and clinics. These are really, really brave people, because they're afraid. They're afraid of the government. They're afraid of losing their jobs. They're afraid of getting doxxed or swatted. They're afraid of being, harassed in public. They have all these legitimate fears, and they put all of that to the side and decide that they're willing to endure what the government, says or does. And they believe in the Constitution, and they believe that at the end of the day, they're going to prevail. And so they're just very brave. But yes, the FBI has been to both of their homes, and indeed, the DOJ's indicted Dr. Heim.
Unbelievable. And it really is well, let me phrase it in form of a question. Is this, broadly speaking, just a scare tactic to silence others, not just in Texas, but at other facilities, for perhaps even other cases where people may want to oppose the radical agenda that currently seems to have such a stronghold? Is this just a scare tactic to try to silence and intimidate others from coming forward?
That's the opinion of my clients. I think that that's not an unreasonable opinion. The FBI agent who went to Vanessa's home is the same agent who signed the summons for Dr. Heim at Dr. Heim's arraignment. He sat in an empty courtroom right behind me and Mrs. Heim. And there's just been a number of acts of intimidation by the FBI and the government. And it's not been, sorry to stutter. It's just been very shocking as an attorney seeing it. And the white collar lawyers and the criminal defense team, no one's seen anything like it. We have the lawyer who was the former United States attorney for the Southern District of Texas as our lead trial lawyer on this case. He's never seen anything like it. So it's really astonishing. But I do think it's intimidating. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely it is. When you see the DOJ coming after targeting a doctor who's working to protect children instead of harming them, that's frightening. We've got less than a minute. Marcella, what do you say to those who are perhaps on the fence about becoming a whistleblower, real quickly?
Well, there's nothing more that you can do to protect children than to come forward with evidence of these things happening. And so the information that you can get that's very valuable is information of fraudulent billing and that getting around state laws making these things illegal. And there's lawyers you can call that will teach you how to collect evidence in the right way to avoid any risk, to protect patient information, for example, and to know that you're protected under multiple federal, state laws, that when you whistleblow, at the end of the day, the law is on your side. In very rare cases, the government's gone after our Texas whistleblowers. But in other states, the FBI and the DOJ have not. And so it really depends. Yes.
We're going to have to wrap it up right there. Marcella, thank you so much for bringing us the latest on these cases. And just a reminder again, if you'd like to help, you can text NURSE to 67742 in behalf of Vanessa. That wraps it up today. We'll see you tomorrow on Washington Watch.
Washington Watch with Tony Perkins is brought to you by Family Research Council and is entirely listener-supported. Portions of the show discussing candidates are brought to you by Family Research Council Action. For more information on anything you heard today, or to find out how you can partner with us in our ongoing efforts to promote faith, family, and freedom, visit TonyPerkins.com.